Classic consoles, they're so hot right now. The NES and SNES Classic have sold very well, and it's due in part to their excellent build quality and really good emulation consistency. I'm sure there have been classic consoles before with the Atari Flashback and the Sega Genesis made by Act Games, but it's very clear that there's a market for premium miniature consoles. And that's why Sony announced the PlayStation Classic, a miniature PlayStation with 20 preloaded games and 2 replica first generation controllers, all for $100. But will it be collectible, or will it just collect dust on the shelves? This is an episode of Retonomics, a series that I put together to view pricing trends to determine if prices will go up, down, or stay the same. This is a futures analysis where I take a look at the PlayStation Classic to determine if you should pick one up now or if they're going to be on clearance in January. The PlayStation Classic is similar to the NES and Super NES Classic. It has an HDMI port, it's powered by USB, and it has preloaded games on it, and it also has controllers that are essentially one-to-one interpretations of the original console. We currently don't know the full 20 games listed, but we do know that we'll have Final Fantasy VII, Jumping Flash, Ridge Racer 4, Tekken 3, and Wild Arm. It's a pretty decent list so far, and I'm sure even better games are to follow. While it does look adorable, fans are uneasy of whether or not this is going to be a success. And looking at the internet and the rumblings, it looks like there's 3 big grievances of the PlayStation Classic. The first thing is that it doesn't include a power brick. $100 for a full console and it doesn't include a power brick? That has fans a little bit miffed that Sony didn't bother to include that. I mean, if you have an Android device, you have one of these laying around or 2, and even if you bought an NES Classic, you have a power brick there. It can also be powered by your TV or even your PlayStation 4. So I think that it's people being a little bit nitpicky about the Sony PlayStation Classic, especially since it's about $100 and people should expect that to be included. I would have preferred a Sony branded PlayStation adapter that's colored in the same vein as the PlayStation Classic. I mean, that would have looked really cool. Now, the second grievance that people are uneasy about is that the PlayStation controller included is the original PlayStation controller and not the DualShock controller that everybody is familiar with. The Sony PlayStation has been around for 25 years, and it's really hard to imagine that Sony used to have this controller. I mean, the DualShock controller is iconic, so people are kind of wondering why Sony didn't just include 2 DualShock controllers. And really, it just boils down to, I think, the emulation of these games. Basically, the DualShock controller didn't come out until 1998, and the first game, and really one of the only games to actually require it, Ape Escape, didn't come out until 1999. And then the next year, the Sony PlayStation 2 came out. So it didn't really, for me anyway, it doesn't make sense to include the DualShock controller. And I know that everybody thinks that it's more comfortable, and it is. But a lot of those games that came out during the PlayStation's lifecycle didn't require a DualShock, and I really think that Sony knows that while these games were compatible with analog sticks, they don't work as well as they would with a basic controller. Of course, it does look that these controllers are USB, so it might be possible to use a PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4 controller and plug it right in there, since it does have dual analog sticks. So I'm curious to see when this thing actually releases, how many people are actually going to try that right out of the box, and if it works. I mean, it might be a little Easter egg that Sony just threw in there. Or they could sell DualShock controllers in addition to the Sony PlayStation Classic. And the last grievance is the games that are going to be on this. Now, to be honest, games from this generation, especially polygonal 3D games, do not age well at all. I mean, it's a very stark difference between the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2, and even now, today's graphics and going back to those original games, not only did they not look good, but some of them just didn't play right, especially with the low frame rates and all of this other things that we now take for granted in modern games. So a lot of people are worried about that. I mean, they're only going to be in 720p, but games like Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill still look really good today despite the low polygon count. But the biggest issue of the games is that they're kind of already available now. They're not available on the PlayStation 4, and I think a lot of people would have preferred to have those available on the PlayStation 4 so that they can buy them and download them. But if you look at the list of games that are already announced, only Tekken 3 is unavailable on the PlayStation Store, and they're playable on the PSP or the PlayStation 3. And I guess with a little bit of finagling, you can play them on the ill-fated PlayStation TV. Now, a lot of people think that the PlayStation TV is the superior option, but the PlayStation TV isn't available, even though it did play PlayStation Vita games. It streamed your PlayStation 4 onto another TV, and it had PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 3 controller capability, which of course had the dual analog sticks. And now to the question of the video: how well will the PlayStation Classic sell? Currently, as of the recording of this video, the PlayStation Classic can be found at Target, Best Buy, and GameStop. The only stores that are sold out right now are Amazon and Walmart. The PlayStation Classic was announced a week ago, and there are still pre-orders available. But that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunistic people on eBay trying to take advantage of lazy consumers. There are currently plenty of PlayStation Classic listings on eBay, and even one with 11 bids at $162.50. And if pre-orders do sell out before release date, you might see that number of sold eBay listings increase, but given the length that the pre-orders have been available, I don't think that we'll see it higher than $150 on average, and we'll probably see a drop off after Christmas. Another reason why the PlayStation Classic pre-orders haven't sold out yet is that consumers are probably waiting to see what the last 15 games will be. If they turn out to be games that are already readily available on the PlayStation Store, you could see a lot of people passing on it. I would think that if any of the working design games like Lunar are on the PlayStation Classic, you'll see a higher demand. But I'm not expecting Sony to pull a Nintendo and release some crazy never before released game like Star Fox 2. Sony is really making sure that everyone who wants a PlayStation Classic will get one if they pre-order it. You know how pre-orders are supposed to work. And time will tell if it sells after January. I don't think that these are going to be flying off the shelves like the NES and Super NES Classic, but it will be something that somebody will look at and say, hey, I remember the PlayStation, let me just pick it up. It's going to be a item that is a second thought compared to the PlayStation 4. You know, there's still a lot of people who haven't grown up with the PlayStation, and I know that I'm dating myself, but you know, there could be a whole new generation of people who have not played these classic games and might feel comfortable picking one up for $100 if they're not ready to jump into the PlayStation 4 brand. Should you buy a PlayStation Classic? Well, I mean, it just all boils down to whether or not you really enjoy the PlayStation. Personally, I picked one up as a pre-order, and I could always cancel if the games turn out to be a dud, but I don't see Sony really just taking a nap on this, and you'll definitely see some really good games. So if you were on the fence, I do suggest that you pre-order them. I mean, it doesn't look like they're going to sell out anytime soon, but that could change once the next 15 games are announced for the PlayStation Classic. And if you were planning on buying these digitally, currently they go for about $6 a game, so you're spending $120 on those PlayStation games, and you still have to buy the PlayStation 3 that works, and or a PSP with a memory card. and a controller, and it does add up. So a PlayStation Classic would be the easier option. Of course, you can always go original hardware. PlayStations aren't very expensive. They're really easy to find unless it's the audiophile version, but personally I would go with the PlayStation 2, since the PlayStation 2 has really good backwards compatibility, and plus you can play PlayStation 2 games, so it's an all-in-one system. They're fairly inexpensive and they're really well built. Or if you have a PlayStation 3, you can emulate PlayStation 1 discs, but I really don't think that that's the best option. But if that's all you have, I mean, it's good enough. Now, the PlayStation Classic could be the Christmas gift to get, but I really don't think that a lot of people are going to be lining up for this, especially since we have a December 3rd release date. If it was releasing earlier in November, I could see people really mad dashing for this and really ramping up towards the holiday season to buy one. So if you're a reseller, I really wouldn't recommend banking all your dough onto this item. It's very possible that these aren't really gonna be something that's sought after. Like I said before, I don't see these going for more than $150 on the secondary market, assuming that they sell out. And that wraps it up for this episode of Retonomics. Let me know in the comments below if you plan on pre-ordering a PlayStation Classic, or if you're just waiting for the next 15 games to be announced. If you like this video, I do other retronomic topics like how Metal Jesus Rocks affects retro video game prices, and also collectability forecasts on the Sega Saturn and Virtual Boy. So if that's something that you're interested in, I do plan on doing future episodes of Retronomics, so you'll want to subscribe for future content. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Super Nicktendo, and I'll see you next time.